Well, we've seen the three major growth forms of lichens, namely crusty crustose, leafy foliose, and shrubby fruticose. Let's first look at some other growth forms of lichens, some kind of minor ones, but just show the variety, and take a look at some fairly common lichens on different substrates here in Ohio. This is a peculiar kind of lichen growth form. It's called the dwarf fruticose lichen. Very dwarf. What they basically are blue-green bacteria, filamentous blue-green bacteria, that have a little sheath of fungus around it. And this particular one, called rock hair, grows on sandstone cliffs and shady woods in southern Ohio. Not very common and easy to overlook. Here's an odd kind of a lichen. Now, some of these don't actually have algae and they're not actually lichenized. It's called a stubble lichen. It looks like a little pin with the head that produces a bunch of spores. Here's a close-up of stubble lichen. This is really small, and it kind of looks like a little, stubble growing on bare wood of standing trees that are dead. This is a kind of a lichen that looks almost like just Soredia. It's called the dust lichen. It's in the genus Lepraria, and there are a number of different species. And basically, lichens, you recall, sometimes reproduce asexually by producing powdery Soredia. Dust lichens are like all Soredia and no thallus. This is it's called a leprose growth form. Here's one that's called script lichen. Script lichen is a crustose lichen that grows on bark, and the apothecia are sunken partly into the tissues of the tree, and they have this wavy look, kind of looking like writing. Here's a lichen that isn't a lichen. It doesn't have algae associated with it. It's just a fungus, but it's in a group that sometimes includes lichens, and so lichenologists will study it and identify it and kind of semi-pretend it's a lichen because no one else will look at it. What the heck? This is a lichen called wart lichen, and these look like little volcanoes, very small, on the bark of trees or sometimes rocks. They have steep vertical sides to their apothecia. So let's take a look at some of the places that lichens grow. And I have this artificial category called lichens in weird places. Typically, lichens grow the same places that bryophytes grow, places where vascular plants can't grow, such as bare rock surfaces and the trunks of trees, and places where the nutrients are so low that vascular plants can't get a good foothold. Here's a canoe that is in my backyard, and I thought it was, just getting dirty from being neglected. And I looked very carefully at the dirt, air quotes, on the canoe and discovered, whoa, it's actually a bunch of lichens that have grown on the canoe. Several species, the colorful Candelaria, the dark brown Phaeophysia, and even darker brown Hyperphysia, the nice light gray Physia. Here's a metal pole that has several species of lichens growing on it. Here's a sign, an old one of these historical markers for the cemetery at Dawes Arboretum. Look at these lichens growing on this sign. The speckles on this indicate that it's a punctilia. The yellow-green one is a flavoparmelia, and the really lacy-looking one is Physia milligrana. Here's a place in Maine where a beautiful seashore, and here's a little piece of the lower left. You see some fiberglass left over from, I don't know, a boat or something, and this lichen that's growing on the fiberglass is a species of Lecanora that normally grows on wood. Now, this is a fairly normal-looking lichen that's very, very common on the rocks along that seaside. It's called Xanthoria parietina. And whoa, look at this. It's a tree that's growing in Delaware, Ohio, far outside the range of the maritime sunburst lichen. What is it doing there? What's doing there is it's hitchhiking. This tree was a newly planted tree from a nursery. I don't know where the nursery is, but I'm going to wager that it's from someplace well within the range of Xanthoria parietina, and it probably won't persist, but it's growing for a little while anyway on this newly planted tree. So let's take a look at some of the lichens that grow on the ground. Principal among these are fruticose lichens. especially in the genus Cladonia. And many members of the genus Cladonia have what's called, appropriately, a cladoniform growth form, which consists of what are called primary squamules, the primary thallus, little flaky pieces of lichen that grow on the ground, from which arise upright stalks that are called podetia, Podetia. And they vary depending upon the species. Here's one that ends in cups. Here's one where the cups flare out into more cups that even can flare out into more cups, with some dark brown apothecia around the margins. This is called ladder lichen, Cladonia cervicornis. Here's one that has apothecia at the top of the podetia. This one, the apothecia spill over the margin. It's called turban lichen. And here's a really well-known one of the few lichens with well-known common names. It's called British soldiers, Cladonia cristatella. Here's another picture of that one with the bright red apothecia. Another type of Cladonia that grows on the ground is a reindeer lichen. They're branched and branched again. They look like little tufts of tangled mats. And this one's called Dixie reindeer lichen. Let's take a look at some lichens that grow on logs. It's not the super most common substrate for lichens because they're usually shaded, but here's a dry stump with a type of a Cladonia called Cladonia cespiticia. Here's a close-up showing the really, really small primary squamules, but fairly large apothecia atop of some short podetia. Here's a log in the woods showing one of the few lichens that can grow in fairly shady environments. It's called Phaeophysia adiostola. And here it is when it's wet. The previous picture was when it's dry. Here's a picnic table at a park in East Central Ohio. There's this little lichen on it that's got small apothecia at the very tip, kind of looking like lipstick. And it's called lipstick powderhorn, Cladonia macilenta. Let's take a look at lichens on bark. That's a good substrate for lichens. Here's some sycamore trees on the OSU campus. And if we look closely at these sycamore trees, we'll see two lichens that frequently grow together. The lemon lichen, a very colorful yellow one called Candelaria concolor, and a gray one with really, really fine lobes called Physia milligrana. In fact, let's go on a field trip and take a look at this combination of lichens today.